who knew we'd be like doing total remote, just a few years ago, right?
Yeah, I know. This whole Zoom thing is really interesting. New technologies.
New technologies, and in some ways we can get a lot done faster, right?
It's true. It's true. And it's although I miss the networking in person, get to talk to people, have a margarita.
There's nothing like in person. We can't have a margarita here. We could have it in symbolism, but not the real deal. And there's nothing like the real deal. We know that, right?
So true.
Okay, Justino.
All right, cool. I think, yeah, we're on now. So welcome everybody to our conversation with Diana Fuentes. And before we start, I just want to encourage everybody who may have questions as we move along. We're going to start with just a conversation about Diana's career in journalism, all the way to her current position as executive director for investigative reporters and editors. That's really an exciting time or an exciting position that I think is seeing so much, right? I have so many questions for you, Diana. Diana, welcome to Latinos Conference, CCNMA, Latino Journalists of California. It's a total honor having you here, and just welcome. Where are you at today? Welcome, and where are you at today?
I'm happy to be here. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. That's where I live. And most of my people for IRE, we work by remote. We're headquartered in Columbia, Missouri at the University of Missouri in Mizzou. But pretty much everybody works by remote. We have a few people who live there, but people are in Indiana and Florida and all over the place. We're all over we're everywhere. And here in Phoenix, we're in Texas. I have another one of my staffers works here in San Antonio. And so, but yes, so I'm in San Antonio, here at home. I'm here at home. Mi casa es su casa, everyone.
Gracias. Thank you so much. And yes, as we've been kind of exchanging emails, and yes, you're traveling, you're moving, you're going places, you're in meetings, you're out of meetings. So it's definitely been a very full schedule for you. And you started about the middle of the year, approximately. You were
late April. I started in late April. Yeah.
I just wanted to want to talk about your career, but just how are you feeling right now that you've been on there since April as executive director? You're the first Latina person of color, as it says in your bio. You're the first person of color to be executive director. How are you feeling now that you've been there for a few months and finding your way around? How are you feeling, and how are people reacting?
I'm very pleased, with the reaction and with the work that's being done. IRE has traditionally, they're the gold standard. We are the gold standard for data journalism. We train. That's what we do. That's our job. We're not really an advocacy organization. We're not, we don't take a lot of stands. Our big thing, what we do is we train journalists really all across the United States. We've got more than 6,000 members from all over the world, really. And we train people and everything from how to do SQL, from coding to actual basic, how do you do Excel 101, that sort of thing, as well as FOI, freedom of information, access to records, all that kind of information. What we weren't really good at the beginning was diversity and inclusion. Yeah, it just wasn't part of our makeup. At one time, we didn't even have very many women on board. We started out in 1975 with a lot of white men. They'll acknowledge it, right? That's just kind of the way it was. A couple of women that were really investigative journalists. But in recent years, they acknowledged and they saw that diversity was important. And it was very important to the board. And they started diversifying. The membership started diversifying and making a concentrated effort. And I felt like they were really trying very hard. And in the last year, particularly the last couple of years, and in the last year with the whole racial reckoning that was coming across the United States, they made extra efforts. 3 years ago, they elected their first Black president with Cheryl W. Thompson. She served 3 terms, an unprecedented 3 terms. The board elected another Black president, Mark Walker, and a Black vice president. We had a Black vice president before, Mark Rochester, and he was followed up with Kat Stafford. And we have a diverse membership, and most of them, we are almost always majority female. So when they went out and they put out the word, and I was asked to apply, and I felt that they were trying very hard. They really wanted to again, the diversity. They need to diversify their staff just as well. But I've been very encouraged by the membership and by all the support I've had. And this is what we're doing. We had our very first conference, a symposium actually, on diversity, belonging, equity, and inclusion. We just completed that one. It was 3 days, 2.5 days of all kinds of stuff. We concentrated on LGBT, with the LGBTQ plus membership and people with disabilities, because diversity is not just color, right? It's not just ethnicity. It has to do with age. It has to do with gender, sexual orientation, geography, urban versus rural. I mean, it also has to do with, as east side versus north side, west side versus south side, those kind of things. All of that matters. It's all part of the rich texture of our communities, and that's what we're doing. And that's what we're increasing. That's what we're trying to get into. And I'm really happy to be able to contribute to that, because sometimes you're just not thinking about it. That's part of it. And that happens to us too, right? I mean, we tell people that no, even an ethnic group, I mean, just because you're a person of color doesn't mean you know everything. I'm always learning something new about how to, increase access for disability. Our own website, for example, we need work on it. We need to increase accessibility. We have some things, we do some closed captioning, but we need to do more. We need to do more things. And there's so much more we could do. One of our sessions for our last DBEI symposium, for example, we had someone talking about how you can increase access. And I was very surprised when he said, nobody does it right. Nobody nationally. I mean, no, not the New York Times, print, Google, pick somebody big. Nobody, they said, does it really right. They do pieces, but neither for the blind or for the hard of hearing or for visually challenged, orally, anyway, all kinds of stuff. But so we're trying to do a lot of different kinds of things like that. We just hired our first diversity and inclusion director. That's Francisco Araorta. So we now have a director of diversity inclusion. He's going through all of our curriculum with a lens towards that to make sure that everything is shipshape, and he'll be adding some new classes and new courses, and just changing things that we've got and make sure things are up to speed. And just in general, he's a trainer, so he'll continue doing that work also. But just in general, I'm sorry, Justino, I could talk forever about that. So
please, I'm enjoying the conversation because, I just want to note that, as it says on your bio, you're the first person of color to hold a position as executive director at IRE. But I just want to note that the search was wide. So yes, many people were interviewed, I just want to talk about, you have over 35 years of experience. You have had so many great opportunities and positions as a leader. So you being at IRE, you have experienced such a wide range of journalism, possibilities. So it's really great that you have that understanding that is so very important for an organization, for IRE. But I wanted to go back a little bit in the past before we get into the whole IRE thing. 1977, started as a copy clerk, I believe, right? Can you talk about that entry? Why journalism? How you got there? How did you start? How did you begin for the new generation that's here and going, wow, how did she get to be the executive director and have all these journalistic, experiences and awards? Start.
I've always liked writing. I liked writing, but I also liked the production end of it. And so in high school, I actually did the production part. I helped with pasting up the paper back in the old days, our high school newspaper. I did more of that stuff. I helped with some of the actual putting it together, the paper. And I liked writing. I always liked writing. I took courses like that. And then when I actually went to junior college. We call it now, it's community college, I think they call them, right? We call it junior college at my hometown. And it was a work study program. I think they still do that. And we do, and I was editor. I was a writer first, a reporter, and then I became editor of the college paper, the community college paper. And we had a very hot, a very, very competitive journalistic environment in Laredo. It was on the border. We're a small town, but we had 2 daily newspapers. We had 3 active TV stations, plus the Spanish language one. We had two active radio stations, everybody competitive. And so one of the local dailies reached out and said they'd seen my stuff. He was in Carlos Fernandez. He was the editor at one of the papers, the Upstart, not the established one, the Upstart paper, and said, they needed help and would I be willing to come in? And I started working there. And that's kind of where I got started. And it was fascinating work. But I started with editing major national columnists, Jack Anderson, which maybe not, our younger people won't know that, but I'm trying to think of what would be an equivalent these days. I don't know. It's like being asked to edit Beyonce, I guess, in my world, right? In our world at the time, because it was too long. The columns were too long. And here I was a youngster and they were going, cut it, cut it, cut it. And I'm like, holy cow, how do you cut Jack Anderson? But okay, you learn these things, right? And you ask for help and you go that. And then I started reporting. I don't recommend this to people these days, but at the time I actually put my education on hiatus and I worked full-time for 5 years. I became a full-time police reporter, did the courts, covered education, but my dad always wanted me to get my degree and I promised him I would. One year I went rogue because I was covering cops and I actually was a deputy sheriff and a reporter at the same time, which of course you would never do that now. Now I was not a police reporter. I became an entertainment reporter because that would have been a conflict, right? But I was full-time reporter for entertainment and a full-time police. And I had an editor who was a wonderful guy who said, okay, that's it. You got to decide, what are you doing? And I opted for journalism. And then I went back to school, got my degree at University of Texas at Austin, and then went back. And I became an editor because that's kind of the way you moved up the ranks. And I think that's also one of the things that the IRE people were interested in when I was hired, was the fact that I became an editor when I was real young and worked with a lot of older people. And I credit my dad and my mom, but my dad, who always said, you respect people and you earn respect. And you earn respect because you respect others. And he was always very much with the idea that everybody deserves respect, from the maintenance man to the president of the hospital. He was a salesman for Wyeth Laboratories. And he said, you just treat everybody equally. Everybody deserves respect. And that's the way you do it. And so that's how I go. And my mom was always like that also, and very much with el respeto ajeno es la paz, that's a famous saying, you respect everyone else and you keep the peace, right? Everyone respects each other. I was in my 20s and I had people working for me. They were white men in their 60s and who were kind of grumpy guys, but we got along pretty well because I respected them. I certainly wasn't going to tell them how to do their job. I could guide them a little and I could suggest things like, I don't know, Mr. Parrish, we've already written about the Rotary 3 times this week. Could we kind of maybe see we could do something a little different? Things like that. But, and you respect them and they listen. Anyway, in moving on, I went from there. I actually took a hiatus from journalism for about 1.5 years. I worked for our state senator, a woman, Judith Zaffarini, who's a fantastic person. She was actually my journalism instructor, my first journalism teacher at the community college. And she became the first woman to become a state senator from our area when women weren't supposed to do that. No, women didn't run for office. Women, and from Laredo, very machismo. So she needed to hire staff. She hired me. I worked with her for 1.5 years. And basically, the journalism wouldn't leave me. I kept seeing things and I wanted to leak it to somebody because it's like, you won't believe what they're doing, and she was trying to fight it from that perspective, from the political perspective. And I wanted to report it. And, that doesn't work because I'm working for her. And so I told her, I've got to go back to newspapers. And she said, I understand, I get it. And so that's when I started working in San Antonio and I worked at the Light. And then I moved up the ranks in Hearst. At one point, it was a matter of, I was very fortunate, I think, in that I had a lot of self-confidence because people supported me and I moved forward. But I could see that there were a lot of people who were talented, but nobody was listening to them. And I could, as a fellow reporter, say that person's story belongs on the front page. but the ones that were being listened to were the editors, right? And I had my editor's ear. And so they would listen to me when I said, this story belongs on the front page, my story does, and they would champion me. But there were other people whose editors were not championing them. And it felt like, they needed a champion, and I felt I could do more good. Although I will say, because we did rally for that, and NHJ and a lot of us said, we need more women in editors. We need more women in management. We need more people of color in powers of authority. And at one point, then the editor of the Express News said, okay, we need an assistant city editor, and we're going to promote you. And I went, wait a minute, not me. I like being a reporter. I mean, I've covered, I covered 4 US presidents and 5 Mexican presidents. And I've done a lot of death and destruction was my thing. I did a lot of, I did the assassination of Luis Donaldo Colosio. I did the Branch Davidians. I did the Waco, Colleen assassinations, all kinds of hurricanes and all that sort of thing. I traveled all over Mexico. And I did, when the earthquake happened in California, I went out to Oakland. They sent me out there to talk to people because back then we traveled a lot, right? So I didn't really want to give that up, but you had to walk the walk, right? I mean, we talked it, now you got to walk it. So I accepted the position, and I found that I liked it, and I was good at it, and I could help with people, and I just went up the ranks. I became a managing editor in Beaumont Enterprise, where I was the first woman, first Latina, first person of color, and in a place where a lot of people in California wouldn't know this, but Beaumont Enterprise is on the Gulf Coast, and it is a large Black community, not too many Hispanics, a lot of Vietnamese people, a large Black community. It's very Southern. And so it was very unusual to have someone of color, but it was fascinating experience. And then I became editor of my hometown paper. I became the editor, following the footsteps of my old mentor, Ori Arambula. And then I came back to San Antonio and to the Express News, and I became director of the community papers there. And then I was deputy metro editor at one point. And then I was leaving because I wanted to get my master's, which I'm working on now. By golly, do not give up, people who are in education. You can do it. I'm telling myself that too. You can do it.
Yes, you can, of course. I wanted to ask you, listening to your story, there's some things that really pop out. First of all, you are a light, Diana. You are a light. You are a bridge, because sometimes not everybody has that ability to have a vision, connect people, regardless of who they are or where they're from. And when you're in a newsroom and you have so many personalities, from humble to divas to I'm a perfect writer to I'm a lousy writer to I'm the best editor, you really have this vision where you can put people together and know how to make things happen. I mean, it's ultimately, any newsroom is a machine that hopefully will be working every day during emergencies, during slow days. And so where do you get that? And where I'm going with this too is, like, you really talked about family being important, your mentors and colleagues, working, collaborating with them, understanding them, and just your drive. And I really think that combination never, it's a good combination, and it never leaves you from beginning. Hopefully it's a continuum, because that's how we grow and we learn and we move on. But how do you balance that? It's that life work balance, and where does that bright light come from? I mean, is it your family? Is it your mom and your dad? You mentioned your dad. Can you talk about navigating forward in such a proactive way?
Yeah, it is. You're right. I think you do need support. I mean, you've got to have the support. My husband, my late husband, was a strong supporter. He was in journalism. He was in TV. We had met at the paper because he started as a still photographer, but then he went into TV. I think you need to find support. You need that well of support. I will admit that my work-life balance has not always been very good. I did work a lot. I still work a lot. I will say that because nowadays things are different, and I think it's good. I think it's important, and I try to keep that up with my people whenever I'm working with them, to make sure that we respect time. But journalism, as you know, doesn't stop. The paper comes out 365 times a year. TV stories, the newscasts are even more online. It's constantly going all day long. And so when we went online, when we started our website, and I was part of that for the Express News and also for Laredo Morning Times, we started those websites, and it's madness. I mean, it felt even more intense, right? So it is a matter, though, like you're saying, of trying to keep up with everybody and sort of figuring out who's good at what and coordinating that. There's no sense butting up your head against stuff that people aren't doing well at. My biggest thing was just finding what are people good at, and you just look for that, and the things that people are good at, you encourage them and you help them and see what you do. I think it's very important to always, you got to like people. I do. I enjoy people, not just the people that I'm working with, but your sources. That's where I guess that started with. And I also think that mentorship, things are more formal these days. In the old days, I wouldn't have called them mentors. Now I know that's what they were. But like, we didn't have formal times, like we're going to meet once a month, or we're going to have coffee, every 6 months or something like that. There were just people that I trusted, and they were interested in what I did. And I would, if I needed some help, I'd call them up. I mean, there's still people to this day that I would call and say, I need a letter recommendation. Like when I went for IRE, I called up an old editor of mine and said, I haven't applied in a long time for a position, but this is really interesting, and I think it would be good. And what do you think? And he goes, well, I think it would be great. And, I'm happy to write a letter for you. And another woman that I had worked with, the same thing. And I called her up and said, Fluffy, what do you think? And she goes, go for it, girl. And here, I'll help you. And, we discussed it. And again, it's not somebody that I meet with every day or ever regularly. They're just people that you chat with every now and then, or say, hey, how are things going? And so you do need to spend time with people like that. And it is a matter of never letting things get you down, or they tell you never sweat the small stuff, and lots of things are small stuff. You figure it when you realize when it comes down to it. I think it's important to always give of yourself, but then to take care of yourself too. It has taken me a little longer to do that.
Important.
It is. And as I think that's good about the modern world, if you will, because in the old days, you think about this, I think about the things that like after this whole coronavirus, right? We had people and we tried to help them because they were out there covering the deaths originally. We had staff on our team that were out there, and they were concerned, and we were trying to figure out ways, how do we do this? And people were staying at home, and we had some reporters that were very concerned about being out in the open, and we had others that were more, well, they were willing to go out with preparations and social distancing and masking and this is before vaccination times, right? But it was reminding me of like on the border, when I was on the border and there was a lot of drug crime going on, and that goes in waves. There were people who were afraid to cross. Well, you can't force people to do that. I know there were editors who were difficult like that, but no, you couldn't. And then you had reporters that were eager, going to go. Well, those you had to be careful with too, because don't be an idiot. Dead reporters can't report. So there's got to be an in between there. And so you balance it, right? And because I'd been on the front lines, that's something else I think that helped me a lot, because I'd been out there. I've been in riots. I've been tear gassed. I've been, in the middle of technically sticky situations, shall we say, that were potentially dangerous in Mexico and in the United States. And, and it's a matter of knowing how to handle things, and just paying attention again to individuals. But in the old days, when I can't remember the Branch Davidian days, which is, that's the one where David Koresh, thought he was the second coming, and the people ended up in a standoff with the ATF and the FBI, and more than 80 people died in the resulting fire out there. And it was, we didn't have very many. DART wasn't around. We didn't have a lot of taking care of yourself and helping people, with mental health issues. You took care of yourself. We took care of each other. We We had carne asadas out there, you know. We the print people, we relied on our we would call our rich relatives, the TV people, because they would bring in the RVs, you know. We were living in our cars. I mean, we slept in our cars because you didn't want to get outside the film. But the guys, they brought the satellite trucks, right? So they had the RVs and they would set up the barbecue pits outside. All right, well, we bring in the beer or the margarita machines at margarita machine, and you know, and that's what you do. And so there's the equivalent of that now. It's a more formalized thing, right? But you kind of rely on each other. And so I think that's what we still need to do, is you rely on each other and recognize that nobody's better than anybody else, but somebody has different talents. And I think that's how you do it. That's how you earn respect. You know, you can't make people respect you. You just respect others. And you know, sometimes it gets work, sometimes it doesn't. What can you do?
Right. You know, we're human beings. I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
we're
Michael
all,
Quintanilla, he
of course.
mentored me as well.
Oh,
And
did he?
yes, I'm so thankful and grateful for that. But you know, he would tell me, like, you know, we're human first. I mean, you know, no matter what, you know, yes, we have our ethics and we follow them, but you know, we're humans first. And so sometimes it's just about listening or maybe being listened to. It's always about the story. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you and talk to you about is, you know, you did entertainment. You know, I've done a lot of arts, entertainment, and culture writing, but all my mentors also said, cover hard news, cover hard, it's going to serve you. And back in the day, it was like, you never know, Britney Spears might be in court, and it's not always about just entertainment. And so I've covered murder trials, I've covered cops in courts, I've covered stuff like that before I really went full on in entertainment, and it has served me well. Could you talk about, you know, you're so versatile, you've done so many things, but your hard news background, that foundation, how important was it for you and how has it served you?
That you're right, absolutely. Learning everything is important. In my world, hard news was what I always wanted to do. That's what I like to do. But I tell people, there's some people that are really gung ho and they want to be investigative reporters right away, for example, or you know, they want to be a science journalist, right? Or they want to be a business reporter right away, or they want to be an entertainment writer right away. They want to write features. And I'm like, okay, you really do need a foundation in hard news, because you got to learn how to write. You got to learn how to write first. And that's where you're going to learn the who, what, when, where, why. Because it's one thing to learn it in the classroom. It's another thing to do it out in the streets, because you don't always get what you need. And you have to learn how to get it. And then you have to learn how to write it. And the basics, you need to do the basics. And you need to do a lot of it. That's why a police reporting is key. I think everybody should do a cop, and you ought to. I also think, and people still do it, though things are changing, of course, because of the internet, in which case these days I tend to tell people they should become a breaking news reporter online, because that's where it is now. It used to be cop reporter in print. Now, I think breaking news online is really where it is, with ethics. And I say that with total respect for my online brethren, but journalism is still there, and people, the users, the readers, the viewers they know when things are right and they're not. And they've been burned these days. You know, in the old days, it was exciting. Everybody could be online. Well, that was the problem. Everybody could be online. And so they started realizing, and I think that's part of the problem that we have as media journalists in the mainstream media, where everybody started saying, oh, I don't trust the media. Well, you have to press them. What do you really mean about that? Because you do believe the media, because you read stories every day that you got on Facebook. And where do you think it came from? Well, because if you trace it far enough, some of that came from CNN, it came from the Times. Heck, it could have come from the Express News, the LA Times, but it just got transferred from so many people along so much social media that by the time it got to you, you think it was Twitter. Well, where did it come from originally? Who really reported it? Where did people first know about Hillary and her email problems? Well, because New York Times reported it, because the Washington Post reported it. Not and for them to say, oh, you all aren't covering it, that's not true. And if you follow it. So anyway, all of that to say that when you're online and you're a reporter for an online site, you need to be just as accurate as you would be if you're in print or on mainstream networks, any of those. It's incumbent upon you. It's your responsibility as a journalist for our industry, for the viewers. I believe very strongly, and I know sometimes it sounds Pollyanna, but a free press, the free press is the foundation of democracy. And we're not going to stay free if we're not accurate and representing the truth. And we can do it. And we have to get away from everybody yelling at us and saying, oh, you're lying, you're lying. You have to put blinders to that. And you do what you know is right. You go, you report it, you be fair, you get both answers, and you report it. And you have to let that stuff roll off your back and blow it off. And don't be suckered into the idea, oh, well, you're not being fair because you're not reporting this. If it's a lie, do not report it. It does not make it fair if you're reporting a lie and as pretending it's the truth. You can't. Our job is to report the truth. That's the facts. It's very basic, but we because we want to be fair and we're looking for the other side. A lot of times, the other side is not the other side. It's a lie, and we cannot pretend that it's true. If we know something is not true, you wouldn't put it out. You wouldn't. It's just not. We wouldn't do that. If somebody's telling you the sky is purple and it's not, the sky is red and it's not, you wouldn't write that. So why do we let people do things like that? Anyway, we could go on and on about all kinds of stuff.
You're so right about it. But now, of course, we have so many in technology, so many avenues and streams of real journalism, people who want to portray journalism, people who put things out there. As we know, we're seeing patterns, we're seeing coding, we're seeing so much is coming at us. How is a journalist at any level, there's ways of doing it, but I want to hear it from you. Like, how can a journalist navigate through doing the job that maybe they get the basics, but then there's so many areas on the internet on coming at people, like you have to maintain that. How do you maintain when everybody else is trying to paint you as you're bad, Yeah,
it is difficult. It's a lot harder than it used to be. That's for sure. There were times, when I first started out, where people, and it was a lot more in terms of competition. It was a lot like, oh, well, you're like, there were let's say two newspapers competing, right? So one of them would say, oh, well, you're the conservative paper, so I don't believe you. It used to be that kind of thing, or it used to be, now it's a lot sharper, right? Now, oh, you're a Trumper or you're not a Trumper, right? You're anti-Trump or you're pro-Trump, for example. Right now, that's kind of the big thing, right? But it used to be, it used to be you're pro-Nixon, you're anti-Nixon, and they all, this is not that new. Hell, in the beginning of our times, when the United States was first forming, you were pro-Washington, you were anti-Washington. People loved George Washington, some people hated him. Jefferson, the father, the independence, or the whole Declaration of Independence. If anybody reads any of the history stuff of what was going on, boy, it was nasty, and people, just like it is now, we've always been like that. The thing is that you just need to step back, and whenever, this is my view, this is what I tell my journalists, my fans, step back and look at what you're doing. Can you truthfully say that that is the truth as you know it? Is there something in what you're reporting that is not accurate? If it's not accurate, how do you explain to your readers? How do you do it? If it's not accurate, does it have to be in your story? We routinely get stuff that comes to us that we know isn't true, and we don't put it in the story. Why do you have to put it in there? Consider that. And like you tell the viewers, we do it ourselves, right? Consider the source. We just have to consider it even more these days. In the old days, everybody always did, and always consider us as journalists being, we were suspicious, right? That we're always like, I don't know, we're always, doubtful, right? We got to make sure, because that's our job. That's what we do for the viewer, right? We are the eyes and ears of the public. And so, the poor guys that are the people, the public that are out there earning a living, right? They don't have time to sit 5 hours through a city council meeting. They're expecting us to sit there or listen to them and figure out what's the important thing. How much do I need to pay in taxes? Or are they corrupt? Is someone there cheating? They're waiting for us to do all that work because they don't have time for that. They want us to do it. That's our job. So we have to sit there and put up with it. That means we have to put up with people yelling at us. Yeah, that's our job. And because the public expects it. So we have to do that job for them. We need to look at all the sources. We need to do that. We have to recognize that there's going to be people that want to tear us down for their own purposes. You got to build a hard shell. You got to build a hard shell. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes and we admit it. We admit it, but we don't let it get us down. We need to say that. We need to tell people we made a mistake. Here's the correct information and go on with it. I did want to say a little bit earlier that while hard news is important, I do think people, if someone gets a chance to be a general assignments reporter, they should jump at the chance and never, ever, ever say no to a story that you think is beneath you. The minute you start thinking a story is beneath you, you jump at that story immediately because something went wrong. And no story is ever beneath you because it can turn into a page one story. Any story can, because someone's life is there and you never know what's on it. So I think that's always been my thing was, anyway, entertainment stories were great. So sorry.
You're so right, because when I've been in Walla Walla and sent to Milton Freewater in Oregon to cover a city council meeting about sewage drainage, I was like, what is this? And then now I realize it helped me to this day.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was beneath me. I was just like, what are they talking about here? They're talking about pipes,
Yeah.
Everything is a building block, and I can't emphasize this enough. I want to quickly go into somebody who America Arias is asking a question, and the question is, how do you combat the idea that your Latina immigrant identity is a conflict of interest when covering stories like immigration, or in America's case, DACA? So
that is such a hard thing, and I find it ridiculous. I really do, because now I can say, for example, I'm trying to think, as an editor, I'm always looking for that kind of conflict, right? And it's possible, like, let's say somebody is filed a lawsuit personally, right? That maybe they had a problem with a retail store, and so they hired a personal injury lawyer, let's just say, right? One of those slip and fall cases. So they hired, Mr. Henry to represent them. And then there's a big story, and now Mr. Henry is the subject of a story. Now, I think I would probably say, okay, there's a conflict there because you're paying the man for your personal life, and now you're going to try to cover him. I think that I could see a conflict there. Now, does that mean you can never cover any personal injury lawyer because you have a personal injury case, or no court story at all? I don't think that's true. I think you might know more about the situation, right? So you're an immigrant yourself. Now, you're a DACA person. You yourself, right? You've got DACA. You're one of the DACA kids. Now, I think it depends on what the story is. I think personally, I, as an editor, would talk to the reporter. Does the reporter feel a conflict? Because I think that's a fair question to ask. Do you feel that you are either pro or con this story? What about DACA is this story? What is it about? Is it an overview? Is it about trying to find someone and what they think about it? Are you too immersed in it? Do you feel like it might be a conflict? But just in general, a blanket thing to say, oh, because you're a DACA person, you can never write about it. That I think that kind of thing is not right. That comes back to the same thing that, okay, so does that mean that because you're Irish, you can never write about St. Patrick's Day? Because your name is Patrick and you observe it, you can't write about it? I mean, that's kind of absurd. But I think sometimes that's kind of the way it is, that because you're an immigrant, just a few years ago, we were asking people who were the immigrants to cover immigrant stories because no one else knew about it. How come suddenly it's become a conflict? That doesn't make sense. Or because you're Black, you can't cover a Black shooting? What the hell? This doesn't make sense to me. I know, but I would say, okay, on a practical matter, if you have an editor who's questioning that, like let's say you're proposing a story and they're saying, well, I don't know because of that. The first thing you got to do is, this is a hard thing to do. Try to squash your feelings, first of all, because if you're upset, it's hard to have a decent discussion with somebody, right? So you kind of have to pull yourself together and talk as rationally as you can to say, okay, what about it concerns you? Why do you think there might be a conflict? And listen to what they're saying. Erase everything out of your head. Try very hard. Listen. What are they worried about? Are they worried because they're afraid that the readers are going to say, oh, the perception is wrong? What is it that they're worried about? Are they worried because their boss might say something? Are they worried because they have an internal problem with immigrants? Are they maybe biased themselves? Listen to what they're saying. And that's what you need to discuss. That's what you need to refute. Because lots of times you're assuming what you think you know what they're upset about. And lots of times we're not right. You know, we're assuming just like they're assuming. And you have to listen. What is it they're upset about? Why do they think it's a problem? And lots of times it might be, maybe they don't even know your personal situation. Maybe they don't know that that you were approved and you're actually okay for the next 3 years. So you're not worried, right? Maybe he thinks that, because you're a DACA, you're a radical, and that kind of thing, or sometimes they know that you're an immigrant, but they don't realize that actually you're an immigrant in the sense that you came when you were 1 year old. and that's your immigrant, as opposed to that you came here just last year. People don't understand that a lot of times, right? They hear things, they don't know it. So I would say that I think you need to have a discussion with whoever's doing that. I think that's the important thing. Again, people to people. Try to have a discussion with them about, well, what exactly worries you about this? I think it's a good story. And I think it needs to be reported. So can you tell me why you think that I might be biased? I want to hear it. I don't think I am, but and you have to be open. You have to be willing to accept that maybe there is a bias, because I think we have biases that we're not aware of.
Right. You're so right, Diana. And it's very important to note what you just said, that it's okay to have the conversation. It's okay to open the dialogue. It's okay to have uncomfortable conversations, because ultimately it leads to clarity. It leads to hopefully being on the same page and moving forward proactively. And so you're right. When we have the ego right here saying, "Rah, rah, rah, rah," sometimes we don't see the other person. And sometimes we leap from I've taken, workshops where we go from it's maybe a conversation that needs to be had in this area, but somebody builds it up to World War III in their head. And it's like, no, you don't need to go that far. Just like you said, listen to what we're saying to each other. And that's respect, that's ethics, that's basic, but it's so important not to leap to the craziness, right? Especially, when there's so much going on right now. And I wanted to transition to IRE and you accepting the position. There's a pandemic going on, the economy's tanking. Sometimes everybody in any position, in any industry, in journalism, will feel like, what's going on? How do we survive? And so yet you accepted the position. This is a very high profile position that's taking you everywhere. I can tell you're perfect for it and you're enjoying the journey, but why decide to take this position, during these extremely shifting times? And, how did you come to that conclusion? You wanted to be in this position, and obviously you're there, you're doing great.
Well, thank you. I've only been here 6 months, pretty much. But when I interviewed you, like you mentioned this before, there were a bunch of, I understand, I don't know who else, but I know that there were a lot of other people that applied, because it is a good position. I mean, this is a great organization, and they do a lot of really good work. I was impressed with what they wanted to do. They really, the racial reckoning was happening. The whole the matter, it was finally coming to light. It always has bothered me that depending on where you were, but it happened in every city across the United States, there would be a big hue and cry sometimes over like a missing child, a white missing child, but the Latino or the Black child was missing too, and nobody said anything, or that kind of thing. Or there was a shooting on a certain part of town and people paid attention to that one, but not the other part. And it just wasn't fair. And you could try to do something, and we did. And I think we individually, I did some of those stories myself and made a point of it, and voice for the voiceless, I believe very strongly, and I think we can do that. And you one person at a time. That's how you do it. One person at a time. You can't give up. You got to keep going. But here was a chance for, like I said, there's we have all these people in this organization, and many of them, and their board, their elected board, wanted to make a difference and wanted to use their bully pulpit to do something different. Everybody wanted the training. I mean, we still have people coming to us. I mean, we have thousands of people that we train every year, and we have an opportunity, diversity, real diversity, inclusion, belonging comes from the ground up. And this is where we can do it. I mean, it's like when you're teaching Excel and you're using examples, why don't we use Alberto Rodriguez? Why don't we use the Black Merchants Association, or the Asians, or the Arab Americans, or pick, or German Americans and Irish Americans, Scottish people, the disabilities, the differently abled people. Why aren't we can use those as examples as normal? They're normal. They're part of the United States. And you can incorporate it. And that's part of what we do. About becoming accessible to more people, about being able to provide training, the whole like Voting Rights Act, and about providing fair opportunities. A lot of that has to do with investigative journalism, and we teach it. And we teach it at our conferences, but we know that there's a lot of smaller newsrooms that don't have access. During the pandemic, my folks did a great job of transitioning to video and doing things live on video. At first they were kind of like, oh my God, what are we going to do? I mean, they were used to teaching people in person. I mean, you're over somebody's shoulder, you show them where the numbers are. How do you do that on video? How do you do it by Zoom? They figured it out. And we have great success, gracias a Dios. And we have a lot of people who come and tell us that they're very happy. We have lots of reactions, people who keep coming back. We have office hours, virtual office hours, where people can come ask for help. And, people in our listservs, our internal community, they still connect with each other virtually and talk to each other. They help each other out. How do I do this? Or I learned this new program, or I'm trying to get this, or has anyone ever got anything from FBI about this? Or how do we get the COVID numbers, out in Chattanooga? Or, how do we do this in Dime Box, Texas? Or, that sort of thing, right? Or Serena, California. How do we do that? And all those kind of places. And I wanted to be part of that. I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to help, and I wanted to help. And so they offered me the job, and I went, all right, let's go for it. Let's try this.
And we're glad you're doing that as well. In the world of TikTok and all the platforms where especially new generations they move fast.
They do, boy.
If I keep up. If I see 20 minutes later, oh, I'm gonna send it. They're like, we did that like an hour ago. It's fast. But what I love is that you see and acknowledge that bridge of the idea of a social media platform and news. Like, even though there's so many changes in technology, there's still a tradition, and an ethical line that we take no matter the platform. And so I wanted to ask you, what advice do you have for the people, for those, the people who are entering journalism, and they're like, I'm interested, or, I'm not sure about it, or, and they're probably really good. Many of them are good at social media, like TikTok or whatever it is.
Always
what advice do you have for that?
Well, the studies show that more than ever, people want to know. They want to be informed. More and more people want to be informed. They're just finding different ways to get that information. So journalism is more important than ever. It is the journalism of verification is more important. Our job, which is to keep the citizens informed, is more important than ever. And they need us. The United States needs us. We, like people always say, and there's a real famous thing about how, this is not a perfect democracy, and there's a lot of things that are wrong about the United States, but damn it, we're the best one in the, I think we're a great country, and we have a lot of flaws, but we're still a great country, and we're free. And we can all, and this is a place where you can complain, and the police don't, for the most part, aren't going to come knock down your door because you said that the police suck. Now, individual examples, we all know there's problems because there's bad police everywhere, but that happens in other countries too. But here's a place where you can make a difference, where lots of people can make a difference, and journalists can make a difference. You can still go out there and help the voiceless. You can still come out and put a story out there, because a lot of people still don't know how to communicate. Despite the internet, despite all that, they still need someone to help them get their story out there. And that's what journalists do. There is a place for us. The trick is the formats are changing. It's the format. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, print, right? 1,000 years ago, it was voice. You were out there, the town crier, telling the news from the middle of the town square. For voice to print. Then it was radio, and then it was TV and online. And, pretty soon we'll be talking to the chip in our heads, that kind of thing. But there has to be somebody gathering the information, verifying it, and presenting it. There's always going to be people out there who want to know what's going on. And they're going to want to sift through everything to figure out what's true. They're going to be looking for someone who they can trust. We need to be those people. You need to be those people out there. You all, journalists, we need you. We need you. And you can be a journalist in anything you want. And you can be a journalist wherever you are. And it's important to learn the basics, how to present yourself, how to communicate properly, and learn all of that stuff. Learn how to do TikTok, learn how to do all the different media that's out there. And you want to learn different ones because, there's people of all ages out there, and there's still people on Facebook. There's still people on Instagram and all of that. You need it all. And and there's still print journalism. I mean, books are still selling, newspapers are still selling, and I think that the print is around for quite some time because there are people who like to read long form journalism and short form. You want to read short things too. Reader's Digest is still selling. There's still things out there for us. I like Twitter myself because I love putting it in a lead. I always liked radio. But I encourage, and my advice is go for journalism. You might want to minor in your subject of interest simply because that will help you, get a degree. Help you get a job. Like if you're interested in science, get a minor in biology, or get your major in biology and minor in journalism. That sort of thing. But you do need classes. Especially nowadays, there's so many people in the world these days. In the old days, experience counted for some. There were a lot of journalists out there who had no degrees at all. Nowadays, except right now, because there's a glut, right? Everybody's looking for, we need more people working, right? There's not a lot of people working, but it's harder. You're competing against a lot of people. You do need your degrees. I think you do need a degree. I encourage people to get their degree and get some practical experience in journalism, in actual journalism of verification.
Absolutely. And, you reminded me, while many things have changed, some things have not, like when Joseph Pulitzer was establishing the school at Columbia, University, immigrants were a big part of, who would buy the papers, whatever it was that they were buying. Immigrants have always been at the center of supporting, buying, reading. And so some things don't change. And so we live in a world where there's so many things happening, and you're so passionate, we're passionate, and journalism craft is still alive. It's exciting. Oh, there's so many things you can do, whether you're a TikToker, whether you're in tradition, long form, short form, cops, sports, entertainment. Like, I love my career. I know you love what you do.
Yeah,
I know you love what you do.
absolutely.
What are your thoughts as, you're starting in this as executive, you're being in the executive director role. What are your thoughts as we go into 2022 and just, legacy and where things are going and where you want to be in a year or two or in any capacity?
Yeah. Well, I'm hopeful. We're moving forward. A lot of we've got several projects that we're working on with fellow journalist organizations, the Ida B. Wells Society, NABJ, NAHJ, a lot of our organizations, the News Leaders Association, we're working in conjunction trying to diversify the ranks of investigative journalists, reporters and editors. I'm hoping to see those ranks diversify further. I'd like to see more inclusive newsrooms. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for. We still get people who say that they're not as inclusive as they could be, right? But I see hope. There are paying more attention. Not everybody is as good as others, but I think there are good intentions. And I think if we provide support for where people ask for it, we have support from a lot of organizations. The Lumina Foundation is one of them. The Knight Foundation. There's lots of them out there that are very supportive, that believe strongly in what's going on and what they want to help. They want to do things, they want to work on it. And we have the corporations that previously may not have been as active as they could have been are now looking at this. They're looking at diversity efforts. So my hope is that this will continue, that it's not just a flash in the pan. We go through cycles. There have been civil rights movements over years, that they happened through the years, right? There was the suffragette movement, and then, it comes and then it fades, and then it comes back, and then it fades, and then it comes back. Each time we come back stronger. And so I think that's the important thing to remember, that, we support each other and you just stay the course, as it was. And like each other, right?
Of course.
Respeto ajeno es la paz.
Sí, claro que sí. I just want to say, somebody once told me, just show up. Just show up. And I'm so glad I'm here today. And I'm so glad I showed up because I got to spend time with you. We got to spend time with you, hear what you've done in journalism. Your career has been so amazing. Diana, you're the executive director of IRE, and we're very happy that you're there. And we can see why you're there. There's a lot of work to do, but you're the person to do it. And I'm very happy for you in this position. Congratulations to you. And it was an honor to spend time with you today. I just want to thank you. I think our time is up, but I want to also remind everybody who's out there, thank them for being here, to go to IRE, check in what's going on. What about Diana? Do you have any last words that you'd like to share?
Well, I put my email. It's just very basic, diana@ire.org. If anyone has questions or has anything they'd like to, feel free, please, to let me know. I think that the one person did ask me, Jacqueline, was that do we about journalists becoming activists, because that is a key. I think that there is advocacy journalism out there. There have been for many years print publications and online publications that are like that. I myself do not consider myself that way. I think it's important. It's a fine line. I think it's a very fine line, and I caution journalists against becoming activists in their writing, because we are in a very delicate position where people don't want to believe us. And for people, the general public, believing often is not whether it's true or false, it's whether they think you're opinionated and whether you're on their opinion or not their opinion. So I think it's important, I personally, to try to not be opinionated on your stories. There are places to be an advocate journalist and where people know That is what it's about. Mother Earth, for example, right? There are Mother Jones, excuse me, Mother Jones, different publications that are meant to be that way. Those are good ones. And that's what you do. Then nobody knows, everybody knows that's what you're writing about. That's what it's for. And it's clear. But if you're writing for a mainstream publication, if you're writing for a set organ, I think it's incumbent upon you to be as straight arrow as you can be, unless you're on the opinion page. Now, personally, do you do something like if you're out there and you're covering a fire and you see someone needs help? Of course you're going to help. I am not the kind that says, oh, well, I'm a journalist, I'm only observing. No, I observed, I got to write my story, I got a deadline, but someone's on fire, or someone's being beat up and you need some help, I am going to go do something because I'm human. And I think you can be involved. But am I going to be marching with you, even if I believe what you're doing? No, I'm reporting. I can't be carrying a poster when I'm reporting the story. I can't do that. That is not my job.
Of course, it's very important to make that distinction because, I've been on many stories and people are like, what side are you on? I'm like, I'm here, I'm here to report. I'm not taking any sides. And sometimes you might feel a certain way about one side or another, but it's not about that. It's about the story, serving the story and our readers. So thank you for mentioning that. I also wanted to just briefly mention to at 12, we're going to have an awards presentation that's coming up. Please watch the Latina Journalism Awards on YouTube at noon. Again, at noon, it's a few minutes away. We're going to be at the 10 most influential Latina journalists are going to be recognized. The name of the Emerging Journalist of the Year and the Latina Journalist of the Year. So Emerging and the Latina Journalist of the Year. So it's going to be really cool, really exciting. I really want to thank everybody, especially Diana, since we're here face-to-face virtually. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for making this meeting happen because I know you're kind of all over the place doing great work. And so
I'm happy to be here.
Yes, it was great to have this chat and hopefully we'll see each other in person at some point soon. So thank you. Be safe out there. And thank you to everybody.